I didn't catch my wife cheating the way movies promise. No lipstick on a collar. No stranger sprinting out the back door. It arrived smaller and sharper than that. A buzz on her tablet face down on the kitchen island. A preview line that flashed before the screen went black again. Same room as last time. Key at front. The knife in my hand stopped halfway through a lime. A bead of juice reached my knuckle and burned enough to make me breathe like I'd been running. I didn't flip the tablet. I didn't need to. My body had already memorized the sentence the way you memorize the first license plate that ever hits your bumper, letter by letter, until the sound of it lives in your teeth. Upstairs, the iron hissed. She sang 2 bars of a song she only used when she wanted me to believe she was relaxed. It sounded like stage lighting, warm from a distance, blinding up close. She floated down in a blouse you don't iron at 10 p.m. unless it's for someone who won't see you at 10 a.m. Breakfast with the client at 7, she said, rehearsed casual. She kissed my cheek. She tasted like mint and heat. Don't wait up. I won't, I said, and meant it more than she understood. The door clicked shut with the confidence of a habit. The house listened to the echo, and then swallowed it whole. Houses do that when they're asking you to admit something. I rinsed the cutting board, wiped the counter until it looked like it belonged to a better marriage, and counted a dozen innocent explanations. Networking, a mentor, a late yoga class that somehow serves room service. I balanced them on a shelf in my head and watched them collapse under their own weight. At 23:09 our joint email chimed with a rideshare receipt. At 23:31, my bank app announced a hotel authorization I knew by lobby smell more than name. At 0:18, a room service charge posted, 2 covers, midnight comfort disguised as calories. Most men would have gone there, hammered on a door until security learned their middle name. Maybe I'm not most men. Or maybe I finally remembered something my father taught me by not saying it twice. Don't go to war angry. Go to war prepared. I made tea I didn't want and poured it down the sink like a ritual. I took a spiral notebook from the drawer where lost screws and orphan keys go to think about their choices. I wrote the date. The time. Same room as last time. Key at front. 2 covers. Then, in my own hand, jagged, unfamiliar, I wrote an intention. I will not lose my temper. I will not lose anything else. The house's night noises took attendance. The refrigerator's hummingbird wing, the pantry pipe clearing its throat. I walked the perimeter like a man persuading his heart there are still corners he owns. Living room, hall, our room with its hairline crack across the ceiling like a river on a map. I had stopped seeing that crack months ago. Now it looked like a route. Somewhere it met the ocean. Maybe I did too. At 1:47, the alarm app reported front door, opened, and at 1:48 closed. I lay on the bed, like an understudy trying not to wake the lead, and taught my breath how to pretend sleep. She set her keys in the ceramic dish with the same soft clink that had once sounded like home. The shower told a story about steam having nothing to wash away. When she slid beneath the sheets, she faced the wall. 6 inches between our spines. A whisper when you're in love, the Atlantic when you're not. I didn't cross it. Neither did she. Somewhere near 3, sleep jumped me like a stranger in a doorway and stole an hour I couldn't defend. When it left behind something I hadn't felt since the day we signed our mortgage. A plan trying to be born. Morning arrived the way debt collectors do. Polite first, then inevitable. She was already in the kitchen when I came down, moving through her choreography, kettle, pan, berries bleeding pink into the sink. We traded sentences designed to be reassembled into a happy marriage by anyone listening through the wall. Schedules, groceries, the neighbor's basketball hoop that creaks like it's haunted. "Big day?" she asked, pouring coffee like a truce. "They always are," I said, and watched the sentence die on contact with the air. We ate eggs we didn't taste. She adjusted her sleeve like she was straightening a story. When she touched my forearm, 2 fingers soft, practiced, I let the contact live for 3 seconds, then turned to rinse a plate. Politeness can be a weapon if you keep it clean. She left with a kiss near my cheekbone and a smile that wanted to rent the future by the hour. The door did its quiet trick again. The house returned to the size it is when nobody's lying to it. I opened the notebook and drew 4 columns with names I could live with: private, public, legal, safe. In private, I wrote what I wouldn't say yet and the distance I would practice. Fewer answers, fewer invitations, fewer chances for her to spend me like petty cash. In public, I listed the rooms where truth wears a suit: calendars, expense reconciliation, badge access reports that sound like linen but behave like handcuffs. Legal got 2 bullets: mediator consult and signatory thresholds. I wasn't trying to punish her. I was trying not to leave my future in the glove compartment of someone else's car. Safe got its own page: copies that don't ask batteries for permission to exist. I printed a timeline built from the only things that don't perform: timestamps and money. The printer clicked like a metronome for an ugly song. I slid the pages into a manila sleeve and wrote a line across the tab, in case I start pretending again. Then I wrote a letter addressed to me: if you forget, you are angry. That's allowed. Sloppy is not. Keep what matters: your name, your work, your dignity. Everything else is flammable. Our wedding photos sat on the bookshelf in a white frame that had never failed us because we can't. I looked at the man in the picture the way commuters look at strangers right before the train shutters: quick, sympathetic, powerless. I wanted to tell him a sentence I wish someone had told me: love's first job is to tell the truth. If it stops, it's not a job anymore, it's a hobby with kissing. At 9:12, a delivery driver rang. A box with her name, the kind of boutique return label that thinks it's a personality. I set it on the credenza untouched. I was not going to become the man I wanted to beat. Coffee cooled. The house breathed. Preparation thickened like roux: boring, necessary, the only way to make anything worth tasting hold together. I checked the bank feed again, not to hurt myself but to teach the numbers what shape to stand in. The authorization from last night settled. The room service charge wore a tip as if it had been earned. The rideshare driver left 5 stars, as if you can rate secrecy. When the kettle whistled, I turned off the stove and let the quiet land. The line in my notebook about public brightened by a shade. I added 3 words under it: compliance wants patterns. Then I added 3 under safe: boxes beat clouds. I packed a small zip case, 2 encrypted drives, 1 printed timeline, 1 letter to the version of me who loves mercy too early. I put the case under a sweater at the back of the closet, behind winter coats that believe in hiding. I didn't plan to leave it there. I planned to give it a home where fire and charm can't reach. By noon, sunlight had shifted from forgiving to forensic. Dust motes crossed the kitchen like evidence waiting for a clipboard. My phone lay on the table like a rectangle too polite to help. Hers chimed with a calendar ping I could hear only because the house agreed to carry it. Wellness. The word tasted like someone else's gum in my mouth. I fixed the hallway hinge she'd mentioned: 3 screws, not 2, and a hand that didn't rush. It felt like theft to let the small success count, but bodies need wins. I let it count. At 16:04, she texted a salad and fueling up, wish me luck, with a sparkle emoji she wears like armor. I sent a thumbs up because it's the exact size of truth some days. Then I opened the drawer where my passport lives and slid the manila sleeve in beside it, as if papers could guard each other. The plan had bones now. It needed a spine. Carpet patterned to hide small disasters. A sconce that made the hallway look like a church pretending to be a secret. I didn't belong here and the air knew it, but the key card in my pocket vibrated like a thought I wasn't proud of. I wasn't going to knock. I wasn't going to go inside. I had not come for theater. I had come to give my doubt a face and a door number. At 12:57 a.m., the elevator pinged and delivered nothing. At 12:59, the ice machine down the hall made a sound like a guilty throat. At 1:01, the latch on a suite whispered, and a man stepped out in a jacket I recognized from a life I now understood incorrectly. He looked both ways like a beginner criminal, then laughed into his phone at something he said to someone he wanted to impress. He carried a metal bucket like it could bless him. I didn't take a photo. The mirror in the room would do that work for anyone who went looking later. I memorized the number above the peephole and the ragged shape of a scratch beneath the handle. Details anchor memory when it wants to drift. Across the hall, a housekeeping cart slept. 2 extra towels sat folded like apologies. The door opened again, just enough for a hand to reach, take the bucket, pull him back into the room with a gentleness that made my teeth ache. I heard the smallest sound a person can make and still be heard. The inhale reserved for the moment a body you shouldn't touch gets close enough to worship. I stepped back until my shoulder found the wallpaper seam, and the sconce's light drew a line across my shoes. I could have swiped the card. Some part of me even wanted to. Not to catch them. Catching is for men who think revelation is the same as resolution, but to hear the latch surrender a second time. I didn't. Restraint is a weapon if you sharpen it in the dark. At 1:14, the elevator carried a 6-pack of bottled water and a woman with a laugh that didn't belong to my life. At 1:17, the corridor returned to breathing. I waited long enough to teach myself the sound of the latch again, soft, certain, practiced. Then I walked to the stairwell and let the door cough me into concrete that smelled like bleach and rules. The night outside reminded me what honesty feels like, cold, uninterested, incapable of lying. I stood on the curb and wrote 3 things in my notebook under the letterhead of the hotel's neon. Door number, scratch under handle, ice ritual. Then I wrote one more. I don't need to see it to know it. The house opened its eyes, as if it had been watching me sleep somewhere else. The porch light timed out, and surrendered the front step to a stripe of early sun. I locked the door behind me and listened to the deadbolt commit. I made terrible coffee and drank it like medicine that doesn't promise miracles. On the kitchen table, the notebook waited with its columns, private, public, legal, safe, like a crew at call time. Under safe, I added a destination, bank vault, box rental. Under public, 3 rooms, facilities, badges, finance, cards, board, hygiene. Under private, I wrote a sentence that looked like a promise. No confrontation until you've already won. Under legal, 2 names and a date bracket around next week. She slept upstairs. The house carried her breathing down the stairwell like a song I used to know. I didn't hate her. Hate is a bonfire, and I was building a slow stove. I packed the slim zip case that would turn into a spine for the plan, drives, prints, letter, and slid it into my jacket. Then I stood in the doorway of our room and looked at the hairline river on the ceiling until my eyes knew it by heart. I whispered a line to the crack the way sailors whisper to the sea, not angry. Prepared? The crack did what water always does, kept going. When the first honest light pooled on the bedroom floorboards, I knew the next place I needed to stand wouldn't smell like lemons or lies. It would smell like marble and metal and signatures, the kind of room where secrets go when they're ready to be heavier than charm. I closed the notebook. I put it in the inside pocket where a different man might carry a flask. And I walked out, the house holding my weight like it believed in what I was about to do. The revolving door pulled me into the building like a tide that used to know my name. Steel, glass, elevator chimes, our company's heartbeat, steady as ever, pretending not to notice I was different. I crossed the lobby with a leader's smile I had practiced in more honest years, and nodded to the guard, who slid a stack of overnight mail toward me, as if paper were still the heaviest thing a man could carry. My office sat where it always did, corner, glass on two sides, the city spread like circuitry. I unlocked the door, and stood a second in the threshold the way you pause before entering a room where you once loved someone. Same desk, same tidy cruelty of cable management, same pen cup with the one pen I never let interns borrow. Different owner, though. The version of me who used to come here believed work could fix anything you were strong enough to outlast. The version who stepped over the rug now had a smaller belief. Work can fix work. The rest needs a different toolbox. I opened the laptop. The screen blinked, patient. Prepared is a feeling you build. I said it in my head, heard my father's version in the back of it, and began with the least glamorous part of revenge, admin. I wrote to facilities first, short, precise, dull on purpose. Badge access variance sampling. The request read like linen. Routine compliance refresh ahead of the audit calendar. Small window. Limited roles. Secure folder delivery. ICC legal the way you carry a visible umbrella on a day when you don't actually need it. The request left my outbox and became somebody else's morning. Good. Let paperwork walk. Finance next. Expenses don't lie if you teach them how to talk. I spun up a reconciliation view that grouped charges by merchant types and hours that respectable people pretend don't exist. Midnight meals. Boutique hotels allergic to harsh lighting. The same rideshare curb cut at the same curb. I filtered by cardholders we kept closest to budget and watched the heat bloom where it shouldn't. I didn't print. Printers are trumpets. Today I was a drum. At 9:06, Caleb filled my doorway like a story trying to decide whether it was comedy. Leather jacket, the one I bought him the night our Series A hit the account, hung off his shoulders as if it missed the man he used to be. He didn't knock. He never did. People who believe they belong think what is for other people. "Got a minute?" he asked, already halfway to the chair. "For you?" "Always," I said, letting the screen slide to sleep. He dropped into the seat, placed his cracked phone on the armrest face down, palmed it like a coin. The spiderweb caught a ribbon of sunlight and, for a second, the whole office felt like a photograph that knew it would be used as evidence. "We good for the update?" he said, grin tuned to board frequency. "I want to lead with pipeline. Keep the room warm. Lead with controls," I said lightly. "Directors sleep better when they hear hygiene before they hear growth." He smiled. Then the right corner of his mouth forgot. "Since when do we open with controls?" "Since we're big enough for someone to ask why we didn't." He watched me long enough to measure a weather change. "Right," he said finally, a beat too late. "Smart." He stood. "Drinks tonight?" "Rain check," I said. "Long day." He lifted his phone, set it back down, decided not to say the next thing. "Cool," he said, and left a cologne ghost behind that had nothing to do with hotels and everything to do with habit. When he was gone, I let the screen wake and built the surface I planned to walk across without breaking it. A one-page ethics and controls refresh I could send to the board 20 minutes before we met, long enough for them to feel informed, too short to forward to their sons. For bullets, deliberately boring, travel reconciliation with a mild heat map, vendor revalidation with check marks that calm the room, card governance with the phrase, "Consolidation of approvers," to make lawyers purr, badge variance sampling, with one non-threatening line about aligning access and declared work. Each bullet was a door I could open later while pretending I'd always planned to. Slack pips spattered the morning like rain against glass. I answered with the kind of leadership tone you use when you're tranquilizing a horse. Steady, low, impossible to argue with. Legal pinged a touch base. I renamed the event as discussed so the subject would be true even if anyone forgot what we said. Facilities replied at 10:23, pulling the sample now. Secure folder by noon. I thanked them in a sentence that made me sound like the sort of person who remembers birthdays and pays vendors on time. I did both this week, which felt almost like religion. Anita, the earliest investor who'd bet on us when our shirts matched more from poverty than taste, appeared in my doorway without knocking. You don't knock on doors that used to be yours. Walk, she said, and started before I stood. The hallway's windows made the city into schematics. She took 2 steps, 3, then glanced at my reflection instead of me, the way predators check wind. I read your controls note, she said. It's boring by design, I said. Boring is a weapon, she said. Is this wise or is it a tell? Both, I said, and she smiled without warmth. What should I expect to hear today that isn't on the page? A variance map, I said. A plan to tighten cards. We'll call it housekeeping. Housekeeping is what you say when you're not ready to say the word problem, she said. Do you have a problem? I have a plan, I said. Good. She angled her head. You look like a man who sleeps again. I dream mostly in spreadsheets, I said. Fine, she said. Don't surprise me. Surprise him. She walked away like exits had always waited for her. Noon delivered a secure folder like a quiet blessing. Badge variance _Q2_sample.csv. I opened it and felt the oxygen that only numbers make. Door readers don't compete for sympathy. They testify. I filtered to executives and squeezed the hours down to the ones when honesty goes home. There he was, twice past midnight on 2 Tuesdays that knew how to spell wellness, once at 1:11 on a Thursday that had already learned how to pretend. I added 3 rows to a private sheet titled Correlations I Can Say Out Loud and left it there like a fuse someone else might light if I fell. Legal's check-in belonged to a genre of conversation I call neutral tea. We talk signatory thresholds, approver consolidation, and the acceptable number of cards an organization can own before it starts feeling like a hydra. I asked for 2 temporary reassignments. In light of best practice. The counsel tilted her head toward the word risk like a sunflower toward noon. If framed as mitigation, she said. Fine. I wrote 6 words that would read well in any room. As discussed, counsel approved temporary reassignment. Then I closed the call and didn't look at my face in the black rectangle. Lunch broke around the floor. A symphony of paper, plastic, faint laughter from people who might still love someone who loves them back. I stood at the glass and watched the city practice forgetting me. Behind me, Caleb laughed the way men laugh when they think the room belongs to them. He said a director's name like it was a pet. For years, I had enjoyed that sound. Now it made me want to inventory every drawer in his vocabulary. At 1:58, I sent the Ethics and Controls Refresh one-pager to the board list. The tone read like a maintained car. Proactive hygiene, I wrote. Ahead of audit. Ensuring alignment. Words you can take to church without upsetting whole people. Read receipts arrived like shuffled cards. Anita, 2 others, the quiet one who never writes and sees everything. At 2:10, Caleb med, nice touch. Didn't know you were cooking that up. I replied with the world's smallest ceasefire, thumbs up. The boardroom absorbed color like it always does and returned it as posture. The mic hissed the way stage snakes whisper before a show. Caleb opened on habit. Thank yous. Market positioning. Pipeline. He knows how to smile into a question and make the question apologize. When he said we about wins, I let it stand. When he said we about delays, I let my pen move. My turn. I didn't perform. I placed 4 bullets on the table like cutlery. Before we run the pipeline, I said, housekeeping. Slide. The dull words that scare the right people. I walked them through the travel reconciliation heat map, the vendor sanity check, the card governance tightening, the badge variance sampling. Not an accusation in sight. The quiet director looked at Caleb instead of me. Anita looked at me instead of Caleb. The room changed temperature by 2 degrees, the kind of shift thermostats ignore and pilots feel in their teeth. We did pipeline. We did inevitable charts. Q&A arrived dressed like curiosity and smelled like caution. Operational drift, the quiet director said, trying the phrase on. Posture? Corrective and calm, I said. We're on it. We've always been on it, Caleb added, smiling at me like a mirror. Now we'll be seen to be, I said, and the phrase settled into the carpet where it would live for years. People peeled away after like confetti learning gravity. Sub-conversations, a phone call in the hall, a bathroom line that turned into politics. Caleb closed his laptop as if it were a drawer that could keep what it held from speaking. Good show, he said too quickly. Good housekeeping, I said. He held my eyes long enough for our history to stand up between us and ask whether he should leave the room. Then he left, jacket catching on the door handle for a half-second, like a small mercy trying to change its mind. Evening slid its hands over the glass and turned the city into a sequin dress. The floor thinned. One by one, the faithful went home to lives that would forgive them or wouldn't. I stayed. The secure folder waited obedient and dumb. I dragged the variance file into a directory named like a dentist appointment and added a readme that would make sense to a stranger who found it after something happened to me. Dates. Reasons. 0 adjectives. I drafted a letter to myself I didn't know how to title and put it under private with the others. Then I created a 4th folder I hadn't wanted to need, mercy. Inside, I placed a blank page. If someday I chose to write on it, it would be because I was safe, not because someone asked me to be kind. At 6:53, I walked the frigid hum of the floor. The boardroom, empty now, reflected me back the way ponds do, flatter, slightly older. I stood outside Caleb's glass. His desk had the false cleanliness of a hotel. On the credenza, a gift bag slouched open. Tissue paper begged for attention. The coat tree held the jacket like a flag from a war we hadn't admitted we were in. I could have keyed in. My badge would have obeyed. I stayed on my side of the glass and learned a grown-up's fact. Sometimes restraint breaks skin better than a blade. Back at my desk, I wrote the email that would sit in drafts until morning. Subject: Controls refresh, owner's notes. It contained exactly what a board expects from a man they still trust. Movements made, approvals logged, next steps calendared. I blind copied an address only 2 people know exists. If I go under a bus, the note at the top of that inbox read, "Start here." The custodial crew arrived in their procession of lemon and mercy. Luis waved. "Late one?" he asked. "Finishing," I lied. "You always say that." He grinned and moved on with a mock choreography that has outlasted more COs than I could fit into the calendar. Dark polished the windows. The elevator chimed now like a lullaby. I stacked the 3 folders with stupidly simple names, private, public, legal, and slid them into a locked drawer. I kept the key in my palm while the click confirmed what the click always confirms. This is yours if you keep being who you said you'd be. I didn't think about her for 20 minutes. That was new. When I finally did, it was not a picture of bodies or a corridor with a sconce. It was our kitchen hinge working again, because I put the right screw in the right hole at the right speed. Dignity, I thought, sometimes looks like hardware. Before leaving, I stood with both hands flat on the desk the way men do when they tell a room the truth and wait to see which way gravity will choose. The city blinked. The HVAC muttered. Somewhere down the hall, a printer coughed out a last page. I picked up my notebook and wrote a sentence that could carry a whole night. No confrontation until you've already won. The elevator's mirror gave me a face I recognized and a posture I didn't. The guard at the lobby lifted 2 fingers in a good night he gives to leaders who never make him nervous. Outside, evening had the honesty morning fakes. The sidewalk accepted me without forming an opinion. I said one thing to the streetlight because it has never repeated anything I've told it. Not angry, I said. Prepared? 2 blocks from the office, I stopped at the shadow of a bank I wasn't going to enter and looked at the marble that pretends money isn't a story we tell each other to sleep. I didn't walk in because we're counting locations now, and I refuse to get sloppy even in my staging. But in my head, I rehearsed the metal drawer sliding open, the envelope I'd put there, the page my future would be grateful to find. Boxes beat clouds? I had already written it. Now I believed it. Back home would be another act in another room. Not tonight. Tonight I let the office keep the weight it had offered to hold, and I carried out only what fit in my chest without bruising the lungs. The plan, trimmed down to bone. The timing, warmed by friction. The sense, finally, that silence wasn't empty anymore. It was loaded. Near the curb, my phone vibrated. A calendar ping I'd said weeks ago when Faith still dressed like routine. Strategy offsite. Holds. I smiled at the word holds. The way you smile at a door you've already unlocked. Tomorrow I'd rename it happening. Tomorrow I'd invite only the people who like air and light. Tomorrow I'd present housekeeping again, in a different room with fewer chairs and no microphones. And then I'd let gravity notice that the ground had shifted 2 inches while nobody was watching. I put the phone back in my pocket, crossed the street on a yellow light, and let the city close the distance between who I had been and who I was going to be by the time the sun looked me in the eye again. The restaurant her parents chose had the kind of warmth you rent by the hour. Wooden beams stained dark, linen tablecloths ironed flat, wine racks that made you feel like money was a personality trait. A candle on every table threw little halos against the glassware, soft enough to pretend no one here had secrets sharp enough to cut the air. It wasn't the kind of place you'd bring war into. Which is exactly why I did. I hadn't been here in a long time, but it still smelled the same. Garlic, roasted chicken, butter carrying whispers of smoke. Her parents loved it. Familiar, safe, performatively wholesome. A stage, really. Perfect. They were already at the table when I arrived. Her father, gray and broad-shouldered, clapped me on the back with affection you can't fake. Her mother kissed my cheek and called me, "Son!" Her perfume cloying but kind. Both smiled like nothing could possibly be wrong. Both loved their daughter too much to see what she had done. Or maybe too much to let themselves admit it. Either way, the illusion was still alive when I sat down. I let them keep it a few minutes longer. Mercy, in small doses, is free. Then she walked in. My wife, hair curled, dress flattering without shouting, smile tuned to family mode. She looked radiant. To anyone else radiant. To me practiced. The shine was paint. She slid into the seat beside me, touched my hand like the contact was proof of love. I let her fingers rest a moment, then moved to adjust my napkin. A small gesture. Just enough for her to notice. Not enough for her parents, too. I saw the shadow flicker across her face when she realized I wasn't playing my part tonight. Wine was poured. Conversation circled around weather, traffic, her cousin's wedding. Her father asked me about work. I spoke politely, just vague enough to be unassailable. Her mother told a story about a neighbor's new puppy. My wife laughed at the right places, chimed in with charm. She was so good at it, at pretending. It almost impressed me. Almost. The entrees came. Plates clinked, laughter swelled, and I smiled where I was supposed to smile. But my hand never left the inside pocket of my jacket. The folder pressed against my ribs like a second heartbeat. When dessert menus were set down, when the second bottle of wine was half empty, when the air softened with sugar and satisfaction, I tapped my glass with the edge of my fork. Lightly. Just enough for the sound to travel without force. Heads turned. Her parents smiled, expecting a toast. My wife's smile froze mid-performance. Her eyes darted toward me, then down to her lap. She knew. I saw it in the way her throat worked before she spoke. She knew. "I just want to say," I began, voice warm enough to sound harmless, "how much it means to be here. Family dinners like this remind us what matters. Love, trust, the ground beneath our feet." Her father raised his glass. Her mother's eyes glistened. My wife shifted in her chair. I let the silence expand a breath too long. "Marriage," I said, "is a promise. A leap. You hope the ground is still there when you land. And sometimes you discover it isn't." I reached into my jacket. The folder slid free. I placed it on the table with quiet finality, between the candles and the untouched dessert menus. I didn't slam it. I didn't raise my voice. The truth is heavy enough on its own. Her mother tilted her head. Her father frowned. "What's this?" he asked. "Proof," I said. "Proof of what your daughter has been doing." "And with whom?" I opened the folder. Photos, receipts, emails, laid out in the soft candlelight like evidence at a trial. A rideshare to a hotel at midnight. A room service bill for 2. Badge log showing access where it shouldn't be. And one photo, grainy but undeniable, her, lips pressed against the man who used to be my brother in all but blood. Caleb. My partner. My friend. The silence broke the table in half. Her father's jaw locked, his hand white-knuckling the stem of his glass. Her mother's hand went to her mouth. My wife's lips parted, trembled. "This isn't," she tried, but the sentence died before it could live. Lies suffocate quickly when there's no air left for them. Her father's voice came low, rough. "Tell me this isn't true." She looked at him, at me, back at the folder. Tears welled. Her mouth opened again. Nothing. The truth had already spoken. She couldn't. She stood so suddenly her chair screeched. The napkin slipped to the floor. I need a moment." Her heels struck the tile too fast, too loud. She pushed into the restroom and let the door slam behind her. The echoes stretched. No one followed. The table remained. Her father stared at the evidence as if reading it could undo it. Her mother stared at me, betrayal in her eyes, not at her daughter, but at me, for dragging the truth here into the light. That's how parents protect. That's how families fail. I didn't argue. I didn't defend. I let the evidence sit between us, heavy, undeniable. Her father finally looked at me. His voice was gravel. "How long?" "Long enough," I said. He closed his eyes, nodded once, as though bracing for a storm that had already landed. Her mother whispered, "Why tonight?" "Because family deserves the truth," I said. "Even if it hurts." I stood, straightened my jacket. "I'll leave you to it. You deserve this time with her, without me." Her father opened his mouth. I lifted a hand. "It's done. The papers are already moving. She'll tell you whatever story she thinks hurts least. But know this, I loved her once. I don't anymore." I set a 20 on the table for my share of the wine. Then I walked out. The floor groaned beneath me, the door sighed as it closed, and the night breathed me in like I'd finally come home. The cold outside hit like honesty, sharp, clean, impossible to misinterpret. Behind me, through the windows, her father's hand slammed the table, her mother's face collapsed into her palms. My wife had returned, crying, begging. A wreck at her own dinner. I turned away. Some scenes are only meant to be lived once. I walked past parked cars, past neon signs, past the couples holding hands who thought love was enough. I wasn't bitter. I wasn't even angry anymore. What I felt was harder to name. A silence that had finally found its shape. A silence that belonged to me. The divorce moved fast. She didn't fight. Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe Caleb had promised her a future he couldn't actually give. It didn't matter. The board didn't take long either. Anita pressed for the audit I'd framed. The directors saw what I wanted them to see. Patterns, controls, numbers that testified without bias. Caleb tried to spin it. Tried to grin his way through. But data doesn't lie, and smiles don't balance books. His resignation letter arrived within weeks. Quiet. Bloodless. Gone. Not handcuffs. Not scandal. Just gone. Like he'd never been here at all. Like the jacket I bought him never hung on his shoulders. Like the friendship I thought we had never existed outside my imagination. I stayed. I worked. I rebuilt. The office became mine again, scrubbed of a shadow. My name stayed intact. My company stayed intact. My dignity stayed intact. That was enough. More than enough. And her? I didn't look back. You don't chase the fire that burned your house. You walk toward air you can breathe. 6 months later, I sat in a cafe with a black coffee cooling in front of me. Across the table, Anita asked the question that had been waiting for me all along. Do you regret it? I thought of the notebook in my drawer. The hinge I fixed. The boardroom where silence grew teeth. The restaurant where I let truth eat dinner with us. I thought of the look on Caleb's face when he realized his story had already ended. I shook my head. No, not at all. Because revenge, done right, doesn't roar. It doesn't scream. It doesn't even gloat. It waits. It builds. And when it finally arrives, it doesn't need volume. It has gravity.